Between 1939 and 1945, the Nazis killed over 10 million people they considered enemies of the state, including 6 million European Jews. At the war's end, Hitler, Himmler, and Göring evaded justice by committing suicide. Many of the remaining architects of the Holocaust disappeared and were never tried at Nuremberg. A decade later, the world stopped asking about Adolf Eichmann, the head of Jewish affairs. Though the horrors he committed were never forgotten, a group of men in military uniforms arrived at a house where a man and his family decorated a Christmas tree in Austria. The man was called outside. His wife, anxious, didn't understand why they were taking her husband, as he was just a simple medic. But the soldier reminded her that they knew who her husband was. Her name was Vera, and their children were Klaus and Edith. At that moment, a little girl emerged from behind the woman. A gunshot was heard from the street. The military man named Peter Malkin rushed outside, realizing that they had the wrong person. However, the other soldiers responded that this man was also a Nazi, so it was just a matter of time till someone else found him. After a few years, in front of a group of people, a man sitting in a chair began to speak. A few years ago, he had learned about an incident in Austria where another man had been taken in his place. He could have talked about what he saw in the quarries near Minsk or the concentration camp at Kulmhof, but those things were done by others. He didn't give orders, he dealt with documentation and did the little he could to help Germany in its struggle. The people around him applauded him. Now the year is 1960. A young woman named Sylvia is watching a movie while a few boys laugh behind her. She turns around, asking them to be quiet, and locks eyes with one of them. After the movie, Sylvia and the man, Klaus, talk and arrange to meet. She invites him to her home and introduces him to her blind father, Hermann. Klaus tells her about his family. His father died in the war, and he is being raised by his uncle. His uncle claims that the Jews have once again taken control of Germany, so he doesn't want to return to his homeland. Meanwhile, at MOSSAD headquarters in Tel Aviv, Israel, a lawyer named Bauer from Germany reports that he has tracked down Adolf Eichmann, a key enemy. He learned about Eichmann's whereabouts from a blind man named Hermann, who had been in Dachau. Hermann had hidden from his daughter the fact that she was Jewish, and now the girl is dating Klaus Eichmann, the son of a Nazi war criminal. Nauer gave all the information to Officer Harrell, whereas the Mossad officer Peter Malkin is haunted by the image of a young woman with children being killed by a German soldier. Meanwhile, Klaus invites Sylvia to a gathering of his friends. There, one of the speakers begins to call out how they must make soaps from Jews and kill them. Frightened, Sylvia leaves. Peter Malkin is summoned to review the plan for Operation Finale. Sylvia, a woman involved in the operation, has agreed to take them to Klaus Eichmann's family home. The challenge is that Eichmann must be brought to trial in Israel. Argentina is preparing to celebrate its Independence Day, and if the operation fails, Israel will be humiliated and local Jews will be terrorized. Peter criticizes Harrell's plan and proposes his own. Eichmann should be taken out on a plane with a delegation flying to Argentina to congratulate them on their independence. The plan is to sedate Eichmann and pass him off as a drunk passenger. But first, they need to convince a doctor named Hannah, who was once part of their group, to help. Peter takes on this task, as he had previous intimate relations with her. Peter convinces Hannah to join them. On March 21, 1960, Mossad agents, along with Sylvia, headed to the Eichmann residence. Sylvia's task is to lure Eichmann out of the house without raising suspicion. When she arrives, Eichmann's wife warmly invites her inside, mentioning that they are hosting a celebration. As they chat, Eichmann himself appears and greets her. Eichmann introduces himself as Ricardo Clement. At that moment, Klaus arrives, displeased by Sylvia's presence, and asks her to leave. Klaus grabs her and forcefully tries to throw her out of the house. Eichmann, irritated by Klaus's behavior, stopped him. Klaus apologizes to his father, but Eichmann tells him not to call him father in front of others, as it could draw unwanted attention. Sylvia leaves, but Klaus follows her, asking her if she is a Jew. She replied affirmatively, yes, she is Jewish. This revelation profoundly impacts Klaus. Meanwhile, Eichmann secretly sketches the face of the agent he saw near his home, suspecting something is fishy. Later, in Tel Aviv, at Mossad headquarters, Harrell gathers a team for the mission to capture Eichmann. They are confident that they've correctly identified their target. Eichmann is hiding under the false name Ricardo Clement. That evening, the team debates whether they should just shoot the criminal on sight, each remembering the loved ones they lost during the war, while most have lost their entire families. Just then, the Israeli Prime Minister, Ben-Gurion, enters the room, offering words of encouragement. He emphasizes that the criminal must face justice through an open trial, which will write a new chapter in the history of the Jewish people. The team receives new passports and departs for Argentina, where they rent a quiet and secure house in a suburb of Buenos Aires. Meanwhile, Eichmann attends a gathering of old comrades, reminiscing about his contributions to Germany's war efforts. Carlos, one of the attendees, announces that they will soon establish an organization, hinting at the continued presence of Nazi sympathizers in the region. The Mossad agents keep a close watch on Eichmann's house, meticulously studying his daily routine as they plan his capture. The local Jewish community offers its support, understanding the significance of the mission. The plane for extraction is scheduled to depart in 4 days, and the community receives their assignments. The team prepares the room where Eichmann will be held, rehearses the capture, and readies the forged documents for the pilots. One night, Peter sees Eichmann through a window, holding his young son, which brings back memories of his sister and nephews who were killed in the Holocaust. He shares this with Hannah, who consoles him. Finally, the day has come. It's May 11th, 1960. The team sets out for Eichmann's home. One of their cars stops by the roadside, pretending to have a breakdown. Peter steps forward as Eichmann approaches after getting off the bus. As Eichmann walks towards him, Peter seizes him, and they drive him away in a car. With the help of forged diplomatic plates, they pass through police checkpoints without issue. Later, Klaus finds his father's glasses lying on the road and suspects that something went wrong. Eichmann is taken to the prepared room where he is interrogated. Faced with irrefutable evidence, he finally admits his true identity. The agents congratulate each other on the successful capture. Klaus informs his father's comrades about the glasses he found on the ground. Klaus suspects that Sylvia might have something to do with it. The Nazis take Hermann as hostage. Meanwhile, Sylvia flees the house. Whereas the agent's celebration is cut short by bad news from the airport, the flight has been delayed by 10 days. They suspect that someone might have found Eichmann's glasses and delayed their flight through some political ties. The team decides to keep Eichmann in the safe house until then. Peter was on night watch for Eichmann. Through the night, he remembers the horrors of his actions. This urges him to strangle him to death, but he somehow stops it. Harel informs the team that the airline will only send the plane once they receive Eichmann's signed consent for the flight to Israel. The agents give Eichmann his glasses and ask him to sign the document, but he refuses, understanding the implications of his signature. Eichmann is determined to avoid responsibility for the entire German regime, insisting he was just a cog in a vast machine. He recalls the Nuremberg trials and says he would rather die than let others narrate his story from their perspective. He fears that the lawyers and the deceitful press will twist his actions to suit Israel's narrative. The Nazis discover the rental agency where Peter rented a car and learn that the Jews paid in dollars. Meanwhile, Klaus finds his father's drawing of the Mossad agent and realizes they are being hunted down. The search begins at all possible exit points. Meanwhile, Peter goes to see Eichmann, removes his blindfold, and tries to talk to him. He asks why Eichmann refuses to sign the consent form. Eichmann insists that as an Argentine citizen, he should be tried in Argentina. He argues that soldiers only follow orders, and without that, wars cannot be won. Peter is willing to listen to Eichmann's version of events and even offers to shave him as they talk. He asks if it's true that Eichmann referred to the camps as disposal machines. Eichmann laughs, saying people come up with all sorts of names for dirty work and calls people animals. He claims he tried to help by encouraging Jews to leave Germany, even suggesting they move to Madagascar, but they didn't listen. A few days passed by, and it was May 19th, 1960. Harel informs the team that the Nazis are searching homes in the area, and they need to move Eichmann to another location, though it's extremely risky. Eichmann is photographed for a passport and insists that the world needs to hear the truth. But for that to happen, he must be allowed to tell his real story. Peter tries to convince Eichmann that telling his true story might lead to the world believing him, but Eichmann remains unyielding. He doesn't want to die in a country where his family won't even see his body. The Nazis close in, searching homes near the agent's hideout, but the team manages to remain hidden behind locked doors. After much deliberation, Peter is given one last chance to get Eichmann's signature. He brings a bottle of wine and personally approaches Eichmann again. He tells him that if Eichmann shares what he's told Peter, the world might believe him. After all, Eichmann didn't carry out every order, but Eichmann remains skeptical, certain that he will be hanged in Israel. He questions why he should be held accountable for all of Germany's actions. They discuss the horrors of war, specifically mentioning the hydrogen bomb, which indiscriminately kills, not caring about the age of its victims. Suddenly, Eichmann asks Peter who the German was that he lost. Peter shows him a photograph of his sister, who with her family was killed in the woods near Lublin. Her name was Flora. Eichmann then makes one final request. He wants to see his wife. Peter understands that the man has surrendered and, swearing by Flora's ashes, promises to fulfill Eichmann's request. In response, Adolf Eichmann signs the document. Meanwhile, a girl, who is part of the operation, pays for groceries with dollars. She is captured by the Nazis and, under torture, reveals the address of the house where Eichmann is being held. At the same time, the Mossad team prepares to depart. Hannah examines Eichmann before giving him an injection. Eichmann suddenly recalls inspecting the mass execution of 5,000 Jews, whose bodies were thrown into a deep trench, surrounded by Wehrmacht soldiers. Hannah administers the injection, and Eichmann loses consciousness just as the Nazis arrive at the house. Disguised as a pilot, Eichmann is carried out of the house, and the agents head to the airport. At a checkpoint, they pass him off as a drunkard, but one of the guards notices a resemblance to the sketch and reports it to the police. They are ordered to delay the plane. The Mossad team boards the plane, but a guard quietly enters the control room and pulls out the flight clearance. The pilot informs the team that they are cleared for takeoff, but they know the police will arrive any minute. Peter volunteers to deliver the clearance to the dispatcher. As he hands it over, he sees the Nazi cars approaching and urges the dispatcher to send the plane immediately. Peter stays behind in Argentina as the plane takes off. Back in Israel, the capture of the criminal responsible for the deaths of 6 million European Jews is reported. Klaus raises the Third Reich flag over his house. Later, in Jerusalem, in 1961, Eichmann is brought to the courtroom where his wife is present. During the trial, horrific footage from the concentration camps is shown, and Eichmann calmly watches the consequences of his actions. The prosecutor speaks of the atrocities of fascism and calls for a deserved sentence for the Holocaust perpetrator. Peter steps out of the courtroom and suddenly sees a vision of his sister Flora with her children. The woman approaches her brother, kisses him, and then disappears forever. On June 1st, 1962, Adolf Eichmann was hanged. His body was cremated and the ashes were scattered over the sea, ensuring that his soul would never find peace. The trial was broadcast worldwide, marking the first time the world witnessed the testimony of Holocaust survivors in court. Thanks for watching the video. Please like it and subscribe the Explanation Pro channel for more contents like this.